This is the Debunking Economics Podcast with Steve Keen and Phil Dobbie.
The Archives.
Episode 314. Is the European economy stuffed?
My colleagues and I are acutely aware that high inflation imposes significant hardship.
The stock market is doing extremely well, which means to me jobs.
Because we inherited a bunch of formulas from the Labour Party that shoved all the funding into deprived urban areas.
All of their red ink is really our black ink.
This is the Debunking Economics Podcast with Steve Keen and Phil Dobbie.
While the US might be struggling a bit with inflation, it's nothing compared to what's happening in Europe. This week, Russia shuts down its gas pipeline, supposedly for repairs, but there's no guarantee it's going to open again. And even if it does, supplies are a fraction of what they were, and Europe wants to stop its reliance on Russia anyway, pushing prices sky high with rationing the only likely solution. Meanwhile, the euro is weakening as the US dollar goes from strength to strength, and that's adding to Europe's inflation pressures. And throw in a drought on top of all of that, adding to the energy and supply problems, and a growing wealth divide. Is there any good news for Europe, or is it all collapsing in a heap? And is it repairable, or is it just dark days ahead for Europe? And what pressure will that put on the survival of the European community? That's all this week on the Debunking Economics Podcast. So if Europe doesn't relent and it keeps on avoiding buying gas from Russia, what shape is it going to be in by the time winter comes around? Dutch gas futures, with the price for contracting gas purchases right now. So this is not all gas, because some has been contracted in the past, although generally from Russia we've been buying at spot prices. So they're up around €340 per megawatt hour. To give now, it means nothing unless I tell you that in early June they were less than 100. So several months into the war, they were 100. Now they're 340. In Britain, the cap on energy prices for the home was a little over £1,000 in summer 2021. It had risen to almost £2,000 by summer 2022. Then it's just risen to £3,549, and research from Cornwall Insights that calculates pretty well this sort of thing reckon it's going to be £5,386 early next year. So that would be a five-fold increase in energy prices in about 18 months, and it's not going to stop there. To give that some perspective, the average UK wage after tax is £27,200. So you'd have 20% of the energy bill in the UK, 20% of the household bill in the UK going to energy. So, Steve, that is a cap, by the way, for households. So businesses don't have that. Their prices can go even faster. So given all of that, just how much of a mess is the UK and European, and can you see any way out of it?
Well, there could be. I mean, what it will take is a reversal in the drought. If the drought, there's suddenly you flip from drought to flood. I mean, the flood itself could be just a devastating damage it does. But a large part of this...
You're talking about the gas drought, because they have a drought.
Yes.
To throw. I mean, we haven't even mentioned the fact that Europe is in drought
that's partly
as well.
Because all the alternative forms of energy are gone as well. So you can't even nuclear power has to be cut back because the cooling you can't put the heat. The essential part of a process like a nuclear power plant is cooling the gas, the steam down, because if you don't, you can't actually do work. There has to be a gradient between the temperature on one side of the turbine where the heat is and the temperature on the other side, otherwise the turbine won't spin.
And
so
Norway is not
cool.
you need water for that, and then Norway is largely hydroelectricity, and they're not getting full power out of that because of the drought as well. Yeah.
So and like you've also got like the barges can't work anymore because the Rhine is too low. Most of the major rivers becoming non-navigable, and that's going to force you onto the road, which means you've got to buy more. So everything it's a huge energy crunch, and the only way out of it is, I think, unfortunately, Europe is going to have to give in to Putin to get the gas, because at some point it's going to be simply unsustainable for them to, continue any form of embargo. They'll probably this is how bad it could be. I mean, I know the NATO powers want to maintain the pressure on Putin over Ukraine, but this could force them to give up. Because they're fighting an energy war, and if they can't get the energy from Russia, then there are going to be people freezing to death or becoming bankrupt over the winter period, which of course we haven't yet seen the start of it. We've already got these incredible prices for gas and for other forms of energy.
Yeah. Unless I mean, can we get gas in from America? I know but that's been delayed as well because there's one big LNG terminal which has been closed down. But I think that's opening up. But I mean, that's a lot of ships full of liquid natural gas making its way across the Atlantic. But is that an alternative? Not
particularly. I mean, because for a start, I mean, there are liquefied natural gas is it's the same stuff. And they're calling it natural gas is basically methane, I understand. So it's methane gas in liquefied form, and you need to have specialised facilities to take that stuff off the ships. It's all very well to get the stuff under port. It's getting into the tubes that matters. And
so you've got to unliquefy it. So you've got to turn it back into a gas.
Pipe. Yeah. Now, that itself was a huge industrial task.
It is, but apparently they're onto it. I don't know whether they're onto it to the extent to replacing all the Russian gas. But I mean, in theory, they think that they can manage that if they minus 15%.
If they work hard enough and fast enough. Well, yeah, but like, will it be in time for this winter? I mean, that is an interesting question because this winter's only 3 months away in terms of really starting to bite 3-4 months from now. Yeah. 3 months, really. So that's a hell of a fast time to.
And giving people money
facilities
doesn't help, does it? By saying, well, okay, gas is really expensive, so we're going to subsidise those households. Well, obviously it helps those households and it means they can afford to buy enough to get through. But it doesn't help the fact that there just isn't enough gas to go around. They have to introduce...
I think what they've got...
Rationing at some point.
Rationing. Yeah. Yes, rationing. I think the only way around it. Because for a start, let's just get one thing on the table here. It is not costing... It's not the cost of production of gas that's gone up. It's the lack of availability and the demand price has gone through the roof. But what you've got is, even though you're not getting gas from the same supplier because of the whole thing over the Russian invasion of Ukraine, they've got the physical cost of getting it in their liquid natural gas into the form that it can go into the pipes that currently distribute natural gas. All these things there are some costs involved, but overwhelmingly this is an impact of just a shortage of supply caused by political reasons, in this particular case the war. So there's not been a huge increase in the price, the cost, but boy, is there an increase in the prices.
So if
this is going to mean that...
if you ration though, you'd have companies are going to have to close temporarily because they're and because they're reliant on that energy and just can't function without it. If you were to do that, then you get back into, and also for subsidies that are needed for households as well. Generally, you'd need to be spending a shed load of government money again, wouldn't you? We're almost back into COVID types conditions.
It's what the government should do. This is again where the government can create the money it needs to buy that stuff. But what you really don't want to have is this is going to mean that the most profitable corporations on the planet are the ones that are causing the society to break down. This is money going to the fossil fuel industry. Okay. Yeah. Huge increased profitability of fossil fuels. Is that what we want? This is a case where the market is a clear case of market failure doesn't even do it justice. The market is going to reward the institutions in our society that are causing our society to collapse. And the last thing we want is more money in the hands of oil companies and gas companies and coal companies for that matter. We want it in the hands of people who are going to build alternative energy sources, so solar, nuclear, wind. That's where you want the money to go, tidal. So we really need...
So step up the windfall tax then?
Effectively, but no, not a tax. And this is why it's important to understand modern monetary theory and the nature of financial accounts. If you did it as a tax, it doesn't do anything. It would mean that you reduce the tax burden in terms of the tax from the MMT point of view, and it's 100% correct accounting. What taxes do is take money out of circulation that's been created by the government beforehand. It's reducing the excessive stimulus by leaving that money circulating in the non-government part of the economy. What you want to do is actually do the transfer. So you don't want to have the money going from the oil companies and the gas companies to the government. You want to go from the oil companies and the gas companies to the solar power companies and the nuclear companies. So you want not a tax, but a transfer. So over a certain level, let's say I have no idea what would be sensible in terms of kilowatt hours and stuff like that. What did you say the current price is and the price was last year? 100 to 300?
340 euro per megawatt hour is what it was this week. Yeah.
Okay.
Up from 100.
Up from 100. Okay. What you do is you have a not a price cap, but a redirection cap. So if the price anything over 100 Obviously, 100 per kilowatt hour is a hell of a profit level for the companies anyway. They get 100, and everything above 100 goes to a fund, which is doled out to the companies producing solar, nuclear. It directs, so not going through the government. It has to go from the bank account, effectively, of the fossil fuel companies to the bank accounts of the companies producing solar, wind, nuclear, tidal.
That doesn't help people, though, does it? In the short term, I mean, it makes sense, but it doesn't. Can,
but at the same time, you can do the same sort of thing. You put a price cap. I mean, this is the case where the usual argument that neoclassical idiots use, sorry, that's an oxymoron, that neoclassical economists use for opposing price caps is it distorts the market. Well, the market is being distorted by sheer absence of supply and by
heavily distorted. Absolutely,
heavily distorted.
But they would say though, and the energy companies would be quick to say this as well, that after 100, it's just not worth us putting the extra effort in. So we are not going to produce at maximum capacity.
Well, the thing is, what you want is to reduce the cost of production for factories that will go out of business. But you also you can't have the public paying those prices, so you have to have the state creating the money. So it's a two-part mechanism. Rather than taxing the oil and gas companies and thinking that's helping government revenue, which it doesn't do, you put a price ceiling. Anything above 100 goes to a fund, which then is doled out to the other companies. And then at the government level, the government runs a larger deficit, and that deficit enables people to pay the higher prices. So you give people money. So the government money is involved in the creation of money rather than thinking you're helping out by paying government tax.
Right, but we're in an international world. That increased price, a lot of that is going to be liquefied natural gas that's being shipped in. Particularly if and we'll find out next week, or in the next few days actually, whether any gas at all will be coming from Russia. It might be that that pipeline is closed down supposedly for maintenance for 3 days. Whether it actually ever reopens again, or they find something strangely that can't be fixed, which means then Europe is reliant entirely on liquefied natural gas. And those suppliers would say, hang on a second. So we can only get 100 per megawatt hour selling to Europe. We can get 300 selling to Asia, or 200 selling to Asia. We'll just not supply Europe at all.
Yeah, and that's quite possible. I mean, this is wartime stuff. I mean, I've been saying for ages, as you know, that our response to climate change is going to turn to a wartime economy. Because we are completely underrating the seriousness. I thought this was going to happen in 10 years. This is a classic take. But one thing I'm good at getting an idea what's going to happen in the future and lousy at timing it. So in the financial crisis, I started warning it in December 2005, and it happened in August 2007. That wasn't too bad in terms of timing. But this time round, I thought I always see these things too early. My wife actually asked me in 1994 to invest in housing, my first wife. And I said, no, it's in a bubble, and I refused to write a bubble. Now, that was the beginning of the bloody thing. I saw it before anybody else.
You lost out big time in that.
I lost out big time. I could have ridden that for 15 years.
I've got a cartoon in my mind of Steve Keen as a dinosaur surrounded by all the other dinosaurs, and they're running around going, we're going to die out. And then sort of like another picture 1,000 years later, and they're going, God, there goes Steve Keen again. We're still going to die out, with a picture of a meteor sort of coming down in the distance.
Yeah, that's basically it. Yeah, so like this meteor is arriving faster than I thought it would. I mean, but again, I've always been given some sense of timing for this from the work at the Limits to Growth, which I read back literally when it came out in 1972, and that they deliberately gave a very vague timeline for how long it would. For their actual future predictions from 1970 forward, which is what the book was about. So they'd fitted it to data from 1900 and 1970 with a number of indexed time series, population, resource usage, CO2 pollution levels, etc., etc. So they got the model to run and roughly match the data for the 7 indices they used from 1900 to 1970, and then they ran it forward. Now their forward bit, when they did the chart of what they were predicting, the chart began in 1900 and finished in 2100, and there were no other time divisions on the x-axis, and that was deliberate. They explain it in the book. They were not trying to give precise timing, but no, you eyeball it and you say it's roughly 2020 to 2020 to 2030, the fund's going to start. 2050 is when there's a serious decline is in train. Now, that my guy, but I think, well, I see this thing coming before anybody else, like I did with the housing bubble. I'll give it, rather than saying it's going to be 2022, which is what it looks like it is. I was saying 2030, 2035. Well, maybe I should have stuck with my original gut feeling here, because this is really the beginning of the breakdown of the economy, courtesy of climate change.
Yeah, and courtesy of politics, of course. I mean, the short-term side of all of this. And it sounds like, just on that, and I want to talk about the US influence and how much that has over Europe in just a second, and talk a bit more about the money. But in terms of this supply of oil, it sounds like we're saying, actually, no, it's not going to work. Because even if you did say, well, okay, we are going to cap the amount that you can charge at 100, and anything over that 100, that money's got to go into a special fund that's going to go into renewables, or helping out those people who can't afford to heat their homes this winter. I mean, that's not going to work in an international marketplace, is it? So we are back to sort of like we've got to make peace with Putin.
I think that's basically it. I mean, this will force Europe to give in on backing Ukraine against Russia. It won't force America. America can continue doing its thing. But it will force Europe, and that, I mean, talk about having to swallow humble pie, because this, in this sense, Putin has been playing this game. Firstly, by saying you have to buy our oil in rubles, meaning you have to trade with us. Now, if he holds the squeeze long enough, it's going to force Europe to give in and stop supporting Ukraine.
Right, and as if that's not bad enough, there is also the question about whether central banks and the role they're taking, supposedly in trying to reduce inflation, are they making things better or worse? Specifically for Europe, could the work of the Fed actually be damaging the European economy? We'll look at that next on the Debunking Economics podcast. Now, Steve, to make matters worse in Europe is as if the whole situation over power and energy wasn't enough. We've got a very strong US dollar and therefore a very weak euro. It's losing strength all the time. And the reason for that is because the US dollar is gaining all the time. And the reason for that is because the Fed keeps on talking about how much they're going to push up interest rates. And the more they talk that up, the more bond yields rise as well, because investors start to see that they can get a meaningful return on bonds at last. So money is flowing into America to buy American bonds because they're being so gung-ho on interest rates. That's inflating the value of the dollar. That's weakening the euro. That's making imports into Europe more expensive. That means European inflation gets worse. So on top of all of everything else, here we have America. In fact, a few people in America, the board of the Fed, basically making this, having this influence on the world, and particularly this influence on Europe. I mean, developing nations, it's the same story for them as well. But I mean, this is just going from bad to worse, isn't it?
It is. I mean, and this is the classic. I think it's called the Seneca effect, and that is that the rise over time is gradual. The collapse, when it comes, is sudden. And this is just taking my breath away, because I actually made a decision to hang on to a house in Europe in the expectation that, I thought I might as well have a front row seat for seeing what's going to happen, and I can afford to hang on to it, so I will. I didn't expect the front row seat to become viable that quickly. 2 months after I'd made the decision, I might have actually sold to get out, because it is looking quite.
Well, never mind you. There's 550 million people living there who are facing all these consequences, aren't they?
And then what you've got is, this is something where it has to be. Forget about letting the market rule. Forget about letting prices determine everything. This is war footing stuff. You have to make sure everybody gets enough to stay alive. So you ration to the household. You ration to factories as well. It's basically commandeering in the same sense that resources were commandeered during the Second World War.
Right, but how does that fix this falling value of the euro against what's happening in America?
It doesn't. I mean, we may see our first summit on energy and rationing take place this year if trends continue the way they are in Europe, and without or we're going to see basically a capitulation by the Europeans. They agree with Putin to stop supplying Ukraine in any sense at all. So Ukraine gets forced to fold. And that, of course, I think has been one of Putin's objectives.
So but Europe on both of these fronts, though, the energy issue and then just the whole fact that the euro is weakening so much now, because the ECB, as far as they're concerned, all of this is fixable. The only way they can counter the falling euro is to push up interest rates. So European bond yields are higher, so investors are more compelled to buy the euro. But to do that, of course, they're going to have to raise rates even more than the Fed, in an environment where people don't have any money to spend. So it's all of a sudden, not only is energy going to cost more, your mortgage on your house is going to cost more as well. So you will have no money left, nothing at all left to spend. So it's going to crush demand. It's going to knock down house prices. The only way I don't know how the ECB responds to that or Europe responds to that, because it's not just the energy side of the equation now. It's also the price of money as well, which is becoming an issue.
Yeah, it's a unholy alliance of forces all at once, and this is again the Seneca effect. Once things start falling apart, everything falls apart, and one thing cascades and affects another. So again, the way that economists think about this stuff is to add up linearly this effect and that effect. What you get is multiplicative. So one factor gets worse, and causes another factor to get worse, and you have a what is minor, adding up things separately, amplify and become devastating. And that's going to happen even with COVID as well. I mean, just what you need. If there's a new variant coming along, and it will be exacerbated during winter because people will be forced to be back at home, and they'll be more enclosed because they can't afford to, they can't afford to keep the place warm, so they'll barricade everything in, trapped air. It is really quite deadly. I think the only thing Europe can do that's actually practical is give in to Putin on Ukraine, and then kowtow to Putin and get the gas back, and then at least produce that particular factor. And that still leaves them with waterways that have no water, and the disease issue as well.
Hopefully some of that. Hopefully the drought will fix itself come winter time. But obviously long term effects of climate change need to be considered. But it's Europe generally doesn't seem to think they're in as bad a place as we're describing. So Isabel Schnabel, for example, is one of the policymakers with a vote at the ECB. She is one of several in the ECB saying, well, actually, I don't think we're going to have a recession. I don't see her words. I don't see any indication of a prolonged deep recession at the moment. It's not even clear that there's going to be a technical recession in the euro area at all. That's her words. It sounds like she's living in cloud cuckoo land. Or she's got Europe confused with some...
Well, she's an economist. What do you expect?
and a central bank economist as well, of course. So central bankers famously never predict a recession, of course. Because in a way, this recession, aside from the energy side, is a bit like 1980, isn't it? When basically Europe was pulled into a recession by U.S. monetary policy. We've seen this before, and I guess we will continue to. So, is there a way that Europe can shield itself from the influence of the United States, or not really?
Not really. I mean, the only thing you're going to have this start causing chaos in the European economy on top of what's already happening with the energy, then they're going to have political meetings of saying central banks cannot use interest rates to control inflation, which won't work anyway, because again the whole idea of using interest rates is to train in excessive aggregate demand. This is all about supply, and it's just going to add to the cost of business and bankrupt quite a few people, both households and corporations, that are already teetering on the brink courtesy of the high energy prices. So it is a right royal mess.
Right, but if the ECB did nothing, supposing even if they did say, well, okay, we're going to start taking some energy from Russia. Russia, of course, isn't going to turn on the taps fully anyway. There's still going to be rationing. He's going to enjoy, turning the thumbscrew and watching the rest of Europe in pain. So because he can. So there's still going to be an issue, even if they sort of call for peace. So you've got that issue. You're not going to fix the issue of going into a recession in a hurry.
No.
And so you're still going to have this inflation issue, which means you're still going to have these, foolishly, these very high interest rates, which are being pushed on both sides of the channel. And if they're going up in America, then Europe has to too, doesn't it? Unless that, because if they were to say, well, no, we're not going to do that, then investors are going to shy away from European bonds. I mean,
well, no, let's get that one right as well. The European bond thing, the bonds will still be purchased because, this is where the euro has been a bit pain in the butt, because when the government, that is the problem. This is where the euro really comes home to roost, because if you had a sovereign currency, if there was a German mark and an Italian lira and a French franc and so on, then the running a deficit, which is necessary in this circumstance, would create the funds and reserves which enable the banks to buy the bonds, and they'd buy them regardless of the regardless of the interest rate, because it's better to get an interest rate at all than none at all on reserves. So this is where the euro is.
Because not long ago they weren't getting anything there because it was negative. The interest rates were negative. But I mean, now I'm positive. So as long as they're above zero, absolutely. Why hold cash in reserves when you can have bonds in reserve and get some money back? But
that doesn't work for the countries of Europe, because they are like the states of America. They're not like the national government, which can create money. They're like the states that have to spend tax revenue, or bond revenue. If they can't sell the bonds, then yes, what you're going to see consequently is they're going to need to issue create money to provide people with basic services in this breakdown. And therefore they're going to have to off the bond. So yes, interest rates are going to go through the roof in Europe as well, whether they want them to or not.
I mean, couldn't they, and they sort of have to an extent with the pandemic, say, well, okay, we're going to issue bonds, we're going to buy, actually the central bank we're going to buy bonds, and we're going to buy bonds from those peripheral regions which need to raise the money the most. I'm not sure that's worked terribly well, but does that get around that issue of not having one single currency, or not really?
Not really. I mean, it's still going to be worse than the country. Like, I wouldn't like to be Greece trying to do this right now. So you're going to see this distributed. Germany will do better, but still badly. So again, all the underlying national tensions hidden by the euro will be amplified by it yet again, like back in the 2008 to 2010 financial
that variation within Europe, that's the other problem. That's another dimension to this whole thing, isn't it? So we look at last year, before we got into where we are now, in 2021, so government debt as a proportion of GDP in Greece was over 200%. For the Eurozone generally, it was 100%. In Italy, it was 160%. In France, 120%. Germany, 65%, even less in the Netherlands. So, I mean, that the poorer countries are going to need to bail out more people as energy prices rise, and that's going to push their debt even higher. So that whole situation of this regional disparity within Europe is only going to get worse.
And this is let's remember that the original objective of the forming the euro with the Maastricht Treaty was to keep government debt below 60% of GDP and the deficit below 3%. Well, what a raging success this has been. Even Germany never actually made it below the 60%. The only country to manage that was Spain, and of course that was because of its housing bubble, and the burst of that blew it up to the 120% mark. So it just shows what a clusterfuck the European Union has been and will continue to be, particularly when it's put under pressure. And there's no greater pressure than what we're going through right now.
And yeah, right now, I mean, GDP is still growing, not much, but it's not. So in the United States, GDP is negative, although they're saying it's not a true recession because people are still working, which is the curious thing. People do still have jobs. But they're still, I mean, not a great deal, but they're still in positive territory in Europe. So a recession hasn't hit yet. It's just a question of time. It's your timing again, Steve.
I know, yeah, which I'm not good at. But this is just a case where what I'm good at is pointing out when structures are just not up to purpose, and the euro is just demonstrating this once more. So the euro is adding yet another reason why Europe is going to suffer. And if they, again, abolish the damn thing and go back to national currencies. But, of course, is that going to happen? No bloody
And the
way.
step back would be to go back to the ECU. So you have a trading currency for business if you need that.
Yeah. The ECU, yeah. Use it for internal trade. That's what it never should have gone beyond that level. Yeah. But so Europe is uniquely unprepared for the challenges it faces. And again, I think the only thing is to have a supranational get-together and organise rationing and just say, forget about the price system, forget about currencies fundamentally. We have to just simply make the physical resources get to people so we don't have people freezing to death during winter and or starving to death if the production of fertilizer collapses and food output collapses, which is another factor. Again, with the drought, and so food prices are likely to go through the roof because again, Ukraine and Russia, we're talking about two of the world's major grain food producers. So it is just it's a right royal mess. I mean, and again, the smooth projection of the limits of growth were not designed to do justice to this because that's where it's sort of smooth systems feeding back and making each other worse, but slowly. This is falling off a cliff, and this is what happened in the real world. So they got the upswing and the pressures and the dangers right and the beginning of the downturn, but then what happens on the other side is this collapse, and that's what we're seeing right now. The only ways out are twofold, I think. Give in to Putin, lose Ukraine, get the gas burning back again. That's kowtowing to but what do you do in the situation they're in? And pray for rain. And then start realizing that in the 2023, seriously start taking attention to what the scientists have been saying for decades, been drowned out by the stupid garbage pumped out by economists saying all this stuff is minor, it'll be in the far future. It's major and it's now.
Well, and it is starting to impact business, isn't it? So I mean, like the heat wave in China, for example, has been stopping chip production because the factories are too warm, so they've had to close down.
Yeah,
so.
and by the way, I saw a tweet which made a point that one of Nordhaus's garbage examples in back in his 1991 paper was to say that a lot of production takes place in carefully controlled environments. And the two examples he gave were heart surgery and microprocessor production. And what's happening? Microprocessor production has been shut down because of a 1 degree increase in temperature versus the 4 degrees that idiot thought was optimal.
I just love it's like saying, well, when the climate gets intolerable, what are you going to do? I just won't go out as much.
Yeah, I know.
The whole depth of that argument.
Or Richard Toll saying we'll live indoors more and use more air conditioning. I mean, God almighty, what jerks these people are. And I want them to pay. I want them to be responsible, to be shown to be responsible for part of the circumstance. Because if we'd followed the guide of the limits of growth 50 years ago, we would not be having this conversation. And it's a conversation I would very much enjoy not having.
Woody Allen's answer years ago to the world famine problem was that people could just eat out more. That it's a bit like that sort of thinking.
He's given the Nobel Prize for Economics. That's about Nordhaus's standard.
So
he knows it's a joke.
I mean, there's another element to all of this as well, just to make matters worse for Europe, in that there are parts of the world which are growing quickly and Europe is not. I mean, it's sort of reached its maximum in terms of productivity. And there are those who say that the trend growth in Europe is only going to get slower and slower, irrespective of, those issues which are really slowing things down. And that the variability of that growth is higher than the average growth. So, for example, the average GDP from now on might just be 1% per year, but the standard deviation might be 2.5%, for example. So you can expect more periods of negative growth just because of, doing the maths. If that's the case, who's going to invest in Europe? You're going to go, well, it's too volatile because you've got this slow growth and this variability. Let's go for parts of the world where we can invest where we are actually seeing growth. Why would we be putting money into Europe? That's another, finger of how stuffed is Europe.
I had this feeling, it's only just totally speculative, but it's possible that if they give in on Ukraine and then get the gas flowing from Russia, so that particular gas energy bottleneck is removed, then at the same time that the rains come, now they could be devastating rains just like we're seeing in Pakistan right now, but if the weather sort of turns back to something vaguely resembling what we used to call normal, then you take the pressure off. And there might be another 5 years or so before it gets to be crunch stage again. But this is the time to take it seriously. This is the wake-up call. And if Europe doesn't take the wake-up call seriously, then it really will fall apart.
Right. So you get the energy coming again. You start to function for a few years. How do you get over that last point I made, where if you've got a continent of, and you get rid of the euro, so got a lot of work to do over the next year. So Europe starts to function, and you start to, hopefully some of that regional disparity will sort itself out because you'll have, Greece will become a cheaper place to holiday again because, the drachma will devalue against where it is with the euro. So you get all that sort of flexibility. So Europe starts to function more normally. But you've still got that issue, haven't you, that you've got a continent here that's not growing very quickly, and there's other parts of the world where you're seeing more growth.
I think the days of growth are over. I mean, the whole, I think a lot of people in Pakistan, I think worried about growth as much as reconstruction and staying alive. And the obsession with growth has to die. And that's actually what's causing us to die right now, that particular obsession, which economists have fed by the bucket load. There's two ways to degrow. You can do it voluntarily, or nature does it for you. We're getting a taste what it's like when nature does it for us. It's about damn time we change direction and said we have to reduce consumption, reduce inequality levels, and drastically reduce the pressure we're putting in the biosphere, because we haven't got long before the biosphere will sweep us away.
Are you abandoning capitalism in that then?
Capitalism has been destroyed by its fans, neoclassical economists. Okay? The biggest danger, that's like the Soviet Union was destroyed by the fans of socialism. Okay, and this is the neoclassical, completely inappropriate model of capitalism. By defending that model, they destroyed capitalism. That's starting to happen this decade.
Right. So we've got to go back to the good old mixed economy days, where we say, well, we have capitalist principles, but we don't let them run free.
Yeah. That'd be a lucky outcome compared to what we've got now. We're in a war economy, and the sooner we realise this is war economy levels and you have to ration and control expenditure, the better.
Well, another enlightening and not particularly rewarding experience with Steve Keen. Look, next time I want to look at central banks. And their role in all of this, and what should be the role of central banks. And we have talked about that in the past, but we'll revisit it next week. Good to talk, Steve.
Welcome, mate. Okay, bye.
And that question about the role of central banks is timely, because Liz Truss, who will almost certainly be the next Prime Minister of Britain, at least for a little while, till she completely stuffs it up, she has said she wants to look at the independence of the Bank of England, arguably because she thinks they didn't move fast enough on putting interest rates up, but probably, thank God they haven't. We'll look at all of that next week on the Debunking Economics Podcast.
The Debunking Economics Podcast.
If you've enjoyed this podcast, then please share it with your friends, like it on YouTube, and subscribe to this channel.